Hello and welcome to the Lessons in Living podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Vinder, and today I'm really excited to welcome Britt to the podcast. Welcome, Britt. Awesome to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So, today we're going to be talking about you, your journey with your mental health, and I guess what you've been going through over the last few years and where you're at now, and I'll let you explain it in your own words. I'm really excited to hear about this and learn kind of what tools and just your overall journey and what you're up to now. So talk to me about your mental health, because I know from what I've read in your book and what I've read online and through your own social media that you've been on a journey.
Yeah.
Can you kind of set the scene and talk to me about, I guess your life?
How long we got now?
Really broad. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, where to start? So, mental health has been something I've battled for a long time. Like, as long as I can remember, it goes way back to my childhood, which is true of anyone, I think, with these things. But I ended up having a full-blown eating disorder when I moved back to New Zealand after living overseas for a few years, where I finished off my high school. And it was around the time of university where I was entering that new phase of life of freedom and alcohol and just being around people all the time in my living situation, that it was kind of like a breeding ground for comparison and for all of these things that I'd been suffering with for a really long time to actually kind of rear their heads and show themselves, even though I didn't really pay attention to them when I was younger. And so I always had these problems with like self-esteem and comparison and self-worth and just talking myself down a lot. And I kind of worked through it by keeping myself busy and doing a lot of sports and putting all of my efforts into achievement at school and that kind of thing. So like on paper, it looked like I was actually really successful because, I was the sporty kid and I had lots of friends and I was good at school, but it was all coming from the wrong place. And so this all kind of came out and manifested at university, as I say, when I was in this environment where it was just me and I had complete control. And I ended up getting to this point where I started going to the gym and I started weighing myself, and that became a target. And I started comparing myself to other people in the halls and what they were eating. And the self-talk got worse and worse and worse. And it got to the point that I was exercising for hours at a time. It was all I could think about. Exercise and food. I would be on Pinterest and I would be looking up exercises for hours to plan my next day. And so my whole world became this small bubble of what am I going to eat? How am I going to burn off what I've eaten? What kind of exercise can I do? And how can I make time within my schedule to make sure I can fit in the exercise? And that was all my world was. And I think looking back, a lot of that was because it allowed me to feel in control when I had all of these feelings, all of these overwhelming emotions that I'd bottled up for so long that were starting to pour out. It was like, I'm not ready for that. I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to put all of my attention into this thing that I can control. And that became my world. It kept me small, but in keeping me small, it kept me safe from the things that I didn't want to deal with. It became a really toxic cycle and I got really unhealthy. I started pushing away all my friends, isolating myself. And when you are starving yourself, you become not very nice to be around because you are so irritable. Like, think of anyone that's trying a diet and how they become. I was like that 24/7. Not a fun time. And it got to the point that I had pushed people away enough and I had lost enough weight and I had got sick enough that people on the outside started to see it. And my friends kind of, in quite a harsh way, pushed me aside in front of a mirror and were like, look at your back, look at your bones. Like, what are you doing? You are so unhealthy. You need to go see someone. And I kind of brushed it off and was in denial at the time. I didn't think anything of it because through my eyes with my body dysmorphia, I was like, what do you mean? I'm not, your reality is very different. And just out of like my classic self, I was like, oh, well, I'll go to the doctor just to prove you wrong because I know, stubborn as I was. And so I went to the doctor just to prove the point and went along with the attitude of, oh, I'm just here to tick a box just to, and he reaffirmed what I thought, because he was like, oh, you're a young person, like this is normal to more sporadic schedules and to be eating these things and letting loose a little bit, and you're thin, but like there's nothing wrong with that. Like us bigger people, we look at a piece of chocolate and would put on weight. And so he kind of completely just shrugged it off and was like, kids will be kids kind of thing, which just gave me ammunition to go home to my friends and be like, ha, see, told you. But thankfully they were reluctant, and pretty stern with me, and so pushed me again, kept me accountable. So I did a follow-up appointment, and the next time I went to someone who was a little bit more empathic and aware, and she outright said, I think you've got an eating disorder. We need to get you into Creds, and that's like a service here that offers free mental health services for people that are suffering with eating disorders. But it's quite a strict criteria in order to get into it, because one, being free healthcare, like there's a lot of demand for it, but also there's only so many healthcare practitioners, so that makes it a double issue. I got put on this wait list, but because I got put on a wait list, it was a good 6 months before I actually got seen. And in that time, now I'd been given a label that I was sick, and I felt invalidated because I didn't feel like I was sick enough to get help. And so I felt stuck and in this place of like, okay, well, maybe there is something wrong, but what am I supposed to do about it? Because these people are telling me that I'm too thin and I'm losing weight and this is unhealthy, but then these people are saying, you're not worthy of our time because you have to wait 6 months to be seen, you're not sick enough. And so I was kind of in this weird limbo space of, I was like, I don't know how to support myself. I don't know what to do. And so you're kind of left hanging for a little bit. And when you're aware of it, it's worse, because then you can take that awareness, and if you don't have the actions to change it and you don't know how to do that, you can beat up on yourself, because it's like, oh, well, why are you doing this? Like, why do you keep failing? And it turns into a really negative cycle. And so, I ended up becoming even more critical of myself. And now it was like, I'm aware that I'm exercising too much. I'm aware that I'm doing this. I didn't know why I was doing it at the time, but I knew that it made me feel better. And I knew that not doing it made me feel worse. And so it was a really hard balance to strike. But eventually I got seen and I started getting a little bit of support, and had a psychologist seeing me once a week kind of thing. And it helped because it gave me an avenue to understand what was happening. And, like talking about feelings was never something that I did or anyone in my family did. Like, we're very much a thing of, you keep quiet. If there's something wrong, like you take yourself away. You don't want to stir the pot. You don't want to create a fuss. Like, it's like you're happy or you go to your room kind of thing, come back when you're fine again. So therapy was really weird for me. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't like it because I'd never been used to talking about myself, all my feelings, and I didn't know what I felt. So being asked the question every week of, how are you feeling? I would be like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't know how I'm feeling. I haven't asked myself that ever. And so it was a really hard thing, but it was also really useful because it started giving me awareness and tools and coping mechanism to actually get my thoughts out, understand what my thoughts were about, where they were coming from, and then some tools and actions that I could use to change them or refute them or do things differently. And a lot of these I applied still today, but also I would share them online. And I started this Instagram where it became my, like, I don't know, my mind dump, basically. It was kind of like my Dear Diary journal. So I'd come away from these weekly sessions and I would write a big post to try and keep all the information that I'd processed alive, so that I wouldn't just, have that one dose of motivation and then go a week feeling like rubbish and then going back into this cycle again. So I started sharing it and I started getting a following, and then other people who were going through it were finding it useful. And then I ended up putting it into a document which turned into my book eventually. And yeah, it was about 3 years of therapy before I was properly discharged and in a place of proper recovery, because, there's like different phases of eating disorder recovery. There's the recovery of your body weight, which is the easy part, if I'm honest. Then there's the part where your brain has to catch up and rewire itself, and that's the really tough part, and that's ongoing. And then there's that transition period between thinking you're recovered and actually having freedom in recovery. And like, I think often we get to this point where we think we're recovered and we're not actually recovered. And it's not until I'm at this place now where I don't obsess about food, I don't obsess about exercise. It's not like I don't stare at my watch looking, have I done enough steps? Have I burnt my, that I'm now like, oh, okay, so this is what it's like. And then I think a lot of it's also been about it being a journey of flip-flopping. And so you'll take 3 steps forward and then you'll be 2 steps back, and then you'll be up and then you'll be down. And I think that's true of any kind of healing journey. It's always
Yeah.
a continuous process, and you're going to have days where you feel amazing and days where you fall back into bad habits, And so, yeah, I guess that's the key gist of the eating disorder part. And then, I mean, there's been mental health ongoing things on top of that, but
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, it's what I find interesting about that is that it was a real surprise for you when your friends and the second doctor were like, yeah, something's not right here. And yourself being like, what?
yeah.
Because I guess when you're like in the middle of it mentally, you're just so kind of jumbled and yeah, you're not thinking straight really. So that's super interesting. And then I guess the journey, like if you had to compare the self-talk, let's say, to you pre-seeing the doctor to now, what are the differences like in the way that you're talking to yourself?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I'm not perfect. I still have a lot of
Yeah.
negative self-talk. I'm not gonna, preach like I'm healed and, like it's a different kind. Like I've dealt with self-talk, particularly around that focus, and I'm continuously trying to work on the other stuff. Having gone into it, I had no awareness of how I was talking to myself. So I went to this first session, and she said, are you aware how much of a dick you are? And I was like, excuse me? And she's like, I don't mean to me, I mean to yourself. And then she read back a few statements that I'd said about myself. And having them read back to me, I was like, huh. And then she was like, would you say that to one of your friends or someone that you loved? And I was like, no. And she's like, well, why don't you love yourself? And I was like, okay, that hurt. And so that has been my default constant state for a long time. Whereas I guess over the course of the recovery, the therapy, all of that, having the awareness of the default thought, it wasn't a thing of like flicking a switch and just changing it, but it was a thing of starting to notice and step back when it would emerge. And so, there would still be a lot of unconscious thoughts floating through, but the more that you would take time to put the effort in to step back, and rather than engaging in the thought and the mind chatter, to actually, have some awareness and be like, why did I say that? What am I saying? Let me just listen and reframe that. It slowly changed the narrative and how I do say things. And so it took a lot of practice. And at the start, it was, I would actually write down prompts. I'd write down the core beliefs that I had and the common statements that I was telling myself. And then I would actively write rephrases to switch what I was saying. And so that became an exercise. And then it became a thing of when I would notice them, I would pick it up and I'd have affirmations, and I would read the affirmations that refuted the statements that I was telling myself. And then as you get more practice, it kind of becomes more of a default. And then I was telling myself the affirmations just off my head because it became a normal practice. And then once you internalize that enough, you start to change the belief, the neural pathway. And so it allows that to be different. And so a lot of the things that I had about you're lazy, you're fat, all of these kind of classic eating disorder thoughts aren't a thing anymore, unless I'm having a really, really bad day. But yeah, so it's just a practice thing. And as I say, like a lot of those have been changed and challenged and worked through. But now I've uncovered things over here that were still lurking and underneath the beliefs that I was telling myself and like the core of it. And that's the stuff that I'm now trying to work through and do the same thing and apply in the same kind of way.
Yeah, I guess that's it, isn't it? It's always, unfortunately, it's never like I'm cured, like I'm
Yeah.
good now.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Like forever, it's gonna be constant work on yourself and a constant journey.
Yeah.
But I think, being able to catch it, right, as it's before it kind of it goes, I don't know, before you go down
Yeah.
to those places. It's being able to recognize when it's happening and being able to stop it. And like you say, have the tools and tricks to be able to be kind to yourself and
Yeah.
catch it,
Totally. Like
which
being
which
intentional,
is,
I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Would you say the self-talk has been the hardest part of it?
I think
What's
it's
been the most challenging?
I think it's the most prominent. I think it's the thing that remained throughout. Like there were definitely challenges throughout the eating disorder recovery that were really difficult, but none of them were a long-term thing. Like, for example, fair foods. That was a thing for a good couple of years where I would start reincorporating new foods into my diet and I would allow myself to challenge things that gave me anxiety or that I had connotations around it being bad or dirty or fattening or whatever you want to label them. And so that was like a thing for a point. And then there was a point where I went through extreme hunger as my body was trying to like level out and my metabolism went through the roof and like I was eating so much. But again, that only lasted for a good 3-4 weeks. And like, whilst that was 3-4 weeks of absolute hell, it passed and it was like it was hell for that part and then it was gone. Whereas the thoughts, the behaviors, that whole CBT link, that's kind of like the crux, the underlying issue. And so that's why I think it was the hardest and took the most work, is because it keeps popping up and it's the thing that you actually need to look at and actually need to rewrite. And it's just a lot easier to go with the default and, like let your mind be in control and just kind of go off on its own little spin cycle rather than, putting a peg in and stopping it and then taking the
Yeah,
energy and time, particularly when you are recovering, because, like maybe if you're like in my circumstance, you weren't eating enough, so you didn't have the energy, or you had a million thoughts a day about all sorts of things that you didn't want to have to take the time to stop it and actually put in the energy into changing things. Like, I think that's
yeah.
really tough. Yeah.
Where do you find the motivation to do this, to make the changes?
I think for me, I watched a lot of accounts of people who were further on the recovery than I was, and I used them as motivation. That, and I thought a lot about my future. I'm someone that is very, and it's something that I'm trying to change, but I am someone that is very much like thinking about where I want to be and what I want to achieve and how I want to feel and what I want to do and and so I was in this space and I felt like so stuck. I felt so shit and I was like, do I want this to be my forever? Do I want to wake up at 60, obsessing over food, looking back, spending my whole life just exercising, not creating relationships and memories and friendships and, like having all of these events that I could have carefree for this obsessive thing that is giving me a false narrative of control? Like, I think, yeah, that paired with having actual real life experience, seeing people who had made it, knowing that it was obtainable, it was something that you can achieve. It's not just a vision, it's a reality for a lot of people. And like, if they can do it, why can't I do it? And so I found
Absolutely.
social media, like people are like, oh, social media, it sucks. But I'm like, if you set your social media up in the right way for the right reason, you cultivate your feed, it can be such a good tool.
Yeah,
And it
I
was for
agree.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, I love that. That's so good. I think about the why. The why is so important, isn't it? Because that is the deeper reason why you're going to make it to the end, is defining that why am I doing this, visualizing like the end goal, where, like you say, where you want to be, what do you want your life to look like. I definitely find that so helpful when I'm going through it. It's like just taking that step back and being like, okay, what am I working towards? Do I want this to be my reality? It's so true. And also So true about cultivating your social media. I personally love social media, but like you say, you've got to, check what's coming up on your feed and make
Yeah.
sure it's aligned with where you want to be going, because it can also be, that whole like comparison
Yeah. Definitely.
stuff can be nasty.
It definitely can. You have to be careful.
Yeah. What else alongside the why have you found really helpful? I mean, you mentioned blogging as a way to dump your thoughts. What else has helped you through this journey of healing?
I had a lot of things. I mean, writing creativity definitely was way up there for me because that's just something that I relied on since I was really young. I find getting your thoughts out really powerful because when you have them all in your head, it can get really clouded really quickly and it can feel overwhelming and you don't get the clarity. And I feel like once you get it out on paper, it's usually not as big or as bad as it feels on the inside. And a lot of the times, it's a whole lot of little things that actually are from just one big thing. And when you have them down on paper, you can start connecting the dots a little bit and then finding the answers to the problem. So I found that really beneficial. And as I say, like doing things like writing, painting, drawing, coloring, like anything that would get me into a flow state and allow the brain to just for a little bit was amazing. Again, having a supportive network is really important. Having, friends who are there to do things with you, to take you out, to treat you just like a normal human because you feel so not normal and you just want to feel included. Like even if you struggle with maybe like eating certain foods or whatever, you still want to feel involved, you still want to feel like you're part of the group. And for me, what I did was I did Warrior Wednesdays, and they were like a weekly challenge where you would do something that would challenge the eating disorder. And so it was like a scheduled time. So kind of, how you have like worry time, they give you worry time and like you can, yeah. So it's kind of like a similar concept of like, this is coming, you can prepare for it. And it's like cultivating a day to do something that scares you that will be the opposite of what your eating disorder wanted. And so I would usually do fear food challenges and I would put it on my social media and I'd be like, join me, tag me, like, let me know, we'll do it together, like just trying to bolster that community and like know that you're not doing it alone. And I at the time made my boyfriend do it with me because it made me feel less scared going into it and just reassurance knowing that he was eating this too and wasn't going to die, so if he's not going to die, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
So that was another thing. Therapy, obviously, if you can access it, is always helpful. Having support from someone who knows their stuff and can hold space for you in the way that you need is really important.
Yeah.
And what else? I guess just getting outdoors, like, and I don't mean getting outdoors in terms of like going for massive runs or anything, but like just taking some time in nature, sitting on a beach, like being in the bush. I always found that would clear my head, and just level me out a little bit. And I guess now I know more about energy, it makes sense. But yeah, I found that would always be a thing when I was struggling the most. I would get myself outdoors, even if it was just to go sit on a park bench and just ground myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea of Wednesday challenges. So
Yeah.
good.
It's
They
a
are
lot.
so good.
Yeah. It was a lot of anxiety around it, but it was also like a lot of fun because, as I say, you knew you weren't alone. And it was always so cool, like celebrating other people's wins as well, like seeing other people getting on board and being like, you're amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned your friends including you and things. What else can friends and family do if they think that someone is struggling? What sort of things can they do?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I think there's a lot of people that are in this situation and they're like, I don't know. And like if I
Yeah.
had been in that situation prior to my eating disorder, I wouldn't have had an absolute clue what to do. I would have probably taken the same approach of like trying to drag my friend to a doctor, but
Yeah.
that's not always the best way. I think if anything, it's educating yourself on what eating disorders are, where they come from, what the symptoms are, the signs, so that you can get a bit more of an understanding about what the person is going through, because then you can relate, not exactly, but like to a point and enough that you can hold space. And I think holding space is the other part of like you know, if you're going through this, you're having a million thoughts a mile, you're feeling misunderstood and completely isolated and alone in your experiences. You want someone there who can just be there to listen to you, to validate you, to say, I'm here if you need me, and like knowing that they mean that, not trying to push you into anything, not telling you, oh, you need this, like, because you know that deep down, you just want someone to be there and to make you feel heard and seen. And then, as I say, like doing these challenges with me was really useful, and like normalizing, we'd have like dinner parties and all that kind of thing. And my friends knew I didn't find that an easy thing. And so, you know, beforehand, they might say something to me just to like ease it in. They'll be like, if anything's wrong during it, just let us know, you know, putting measures around it. And then it just makes you feel a little bit safer in those situations when it's already a really anxiety creating environment. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess because if I was to think about me in that situation where I had a friend that had an eating disorder, my natural response, I mean, let's just say they're not a best friend, but like a friend in the friend group, my natural response would probably be to like not address it. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to make that person feel awkward or uncomfortable, or to be like, hey, I know, or
Yeah.
whatever. I don't know, even though you wouldn't be doing that. So I guess what you're saying is the opposite, is to just, I mean, you might not even have to say the words, right? But just to be like, hey, I got you, or whatever, if you need
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah. And
right?
if you
So would
are
it be to
going to,
ignore it?
yeah, don't ignore it. And I mean,
Yeah.
there's the two extremes of like, you don't want to ignore it and just let it be, but you also don't want to go in pointing finger and making them feel
Yeah.
shame, because they're already feeling a lot of shame and body issues as it is.
Mm.
And you don't want to focus it on their body. You want to focus it, if you are going to approach it, you want to focus it from the point of view of their actions and being worried and wanting to be there for them and holding space, rather than, oh, I've noticed you're not eating enough, oh, you're losing weight, like, you know. And that's
Yeah.
very accusatory, and it puts them in a state of defense. And like, you
Yeah.
don't want someone to be in a state of defense. You want them to feel comfortable, and so that it can be open to your help.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's really important how you do approach it if you are going to take those steps to raise the
Yeah.
conversation.
Handle with care.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. No, it's useful to hear that. I mean, I would like to think that I wouldn't be like finger pointing, but you know, it's the yeah, you just handle it with care, don't you? So where are you at now? Talk to me now. I know you've just come back from Bali with a new skill, which I'd love for you to quickly jump into. And I know you've just started a new business. So yeah, can you talk to me about where you're at now and what's going on?
Sure. Yeah, so I've pivoted on my career. Thought, you know, I would just continue working my way up the government ladder and be a corporate girly, but turns out I'm a spiritual girly instead. And I think for a long time I'd been living quite an inauthentic life, living for other people and based on expectations that other people had of me. I kind of fell into circles of friends and circles in terms of my work, and just I kind of fell into a lot of things, and I made them my identity. I made them my everything. And I started identifying with them because I was like, oh, well, this makes me feel seen and valued and whatever. And it wasn't fulfilling me. And I just felt like something wasn't right. I never felt like I really fitted in. I didn't feel like I had hit the mark. And it's like, even though I was progressing and, you know, I was making the goals that I once had of like that salary or that promotion or that car, it never felt right. And so,
Mhm.
to be fair, it took a breakup for all of this to start happening, which is funny, always the way.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it
Sometimes it's
happens
what
like
you
that.
sometimes it's what you
Yeah,
need to really like
yeah. Just
question,
a
what am I
full-blown
doing?
crisis.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, it's the thing. To question, what am I doing with my life and why am I here and why am I so unhappy and what can I do about it? And so I was like, naturally, I need a holiday. Bali is somewhere that is a spiritual haven, and I'd started leaning back into my spirituality a little bit. And I'd gone to a Reiki circle here in Wellington just by chance, because one of my friends was like, oh, the lady that takes this is really cool, like you should go to this because you should meet her. And so I only went to the Reiki to meet this lady. I didn't go to the Reiki for the Reiki. I had no idea
Can
what
you
Reiki
explain?
was.
Yeah, can you explain what it is?
Yeah, so
Because I'm sure a lot of people, I mean, I didn't know before speaking with you, really.
yeah,
I have no idea
sure.
what it is.
Oh wow, I didn't at the time either. But Reiki is basically energy healing. It's taking stuck energy within the body and moving it out so that it frees up the way that your electrical charge goes through your body. Because when it gets stuck in certain places, it causes different ailments, whether that's physical, mental, emotional. And by moving it out, it releases it so that you can get back to equilibrium, I guess. And so I went to this Reiki circle with no expectations, no idea what I was in for. And it was an hour, so I dragged my friend along with me because I was like, help me, I don't want to go by myself. And we both went into this, and I came out feeling absolutely amazing. And I couldn't really explain it. I was like, oh, is this placebo? What is this? Like, I was a little bit skeptical because I was very much in my logic brain. And then after that Reiki session, I started seeing like hand symbols everywhere. So I had this car air freshener thing and hanging up in my car, and it had hands on it. And then I bought this candle and it had the same hands on it next to my bed. And then I looked at my brand logo, which also has hands in it. And there was just all of these things, and I was like, huh, I feel like I want to do Reiki. And so I was going to Bali anyway, which is a spiritual haven. And I was like, maybe I should do Reiki there. I'll look into it. I'll see what it's all about. And I looked at a couple of courses, and I found one that really resonated with me. And I looked at it, and it was like perfect. The dates were within a certain amount of time, which would have been perfect for the amount of leave that I needed. Everything just kind of fell into place. And so I applied for the leave. I got the approval. I got the flight. I ended up getting like a flight upgrade both ways for like $200, which like perfect
Nice.
bonus. Went to this course, which was like a 5-day intensive course with a small group of 5 other girls, the most amazing, hilarious Reiki master. And I was like a little kid who just saw an airplane for the first time. Like, I was so excited going every day. It was like there was this new passion set alight in my tummy that I hadn't felt for such a long time. Like, I was here and I was like, this just feels right. This is like Hogwarts. Like, I always dreamed about going to Hogwarts, and now like this is like the human equivalent of it. Energy is crazy. Anyway, so I spent this 5 days doing it, and I came away with some crazy experiences, doing some like practical work, and I was like, I think there's something to this. And once you get your level 2, you can, which is what I was doing, level 1 and 2, you can practice on other people, not just yourself. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll take up some clients or something when I get back, take on a few pro bonos, see what it's all about. And as I did, it just kind of, everything fell into place. So like, one person would come along, and then they would tell their friend, and then their friend would tell their partner, and then there's just all of these little connections that were being made. And so I was getting more and more people coming along, getting more and more practice, enjoying it more and more, and just getting really excited about it. And I had this huge contrast between, before I'd gone away, I was dreading my work. I was getting to the point that my Sunday was being spent thinking about work coming up, and then half my Saturday was, and it was just becoming less of my weekend was being used in the present and more about thinking about, oh my God, I have to go to work. And when I came back and I'd had this experience of just being so bubbly, so like childlike and excited, and going back into that environment, I was like, no, I cannot do this. This is not for me. We are not aligned anymore. This is, like this whole thing of me living for somebody else coming back up. And I said to my friend, I was like, I can't do this. And he was like, you should quit. And I was like, lol, yeah. Like, yeah, right. And he's like, no, like, seriously, you should quit. And I just sat there and I was like, you know what? I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit. And that day I put in my my resignation, knowing I had a safety blanket because I have a decent amount of savings. Like, I didn't just quit with $5 in my bank account. That would have been a lot more risky. But being quite type A personality that I am, like, it was a really big deal for me, like, to take that leap of faith. It's something that terrifies me, and I still look back and I'm like, I can't believe I did that. But I'm also like, I am so glad that I did, because I didn't want to waste another year, another day living a life that wasn't authentically me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I set up my own business, Soluna, which is predominantly around Reiki, but also life coaching, because I have a life coaching certificate that I got years ago. And I do some tarot reading, because spiritual girl.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and I got into pottery also in the last year. So I have a pottery wheel, and so that's really good for grounding. So I've got a service around that. And I was like, why not just make it a whole holistic offering?
Yeah.
Around like aligning with yourself, releasing things that don't serve, like moving into the space of spiritual hygiene, and just go for it. Trust in myself, trust in my vision, and
Yeah,
see where things go. And things have just
absolutely.
they've kind of flown. So yeah.
Who would be your ideal client?
I don't have necessarily an ideal client so much, but honestly, the ones that I find the most satisfying myself are like the husbands who come along from their wives, and they're really skeptical, and they're like, oh, this isn't going to work. And then they have an amazing experience. And, like these things come up that they can't explain. And they're like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
honestly, it makes me so happy. Like, it just makes me so happy seeing like people who were so closed off having their world open a little bit.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think anybody like would benefit from this. I don't think there's anybody who wouldn't. So my target market is really
Anyone.
anybody who wants to look at themselves, or to start healing, start that journey. And it's a commitment, to be fair. Like, starting your healing journey it's a big step, but yeah,
Yeah, but it's worth it.
it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. Wow, it's so awesome to see how far you've come and obviously done all this work on yourself, and now you're a business owner helping other people. I love it. It's awesome. Proud of you. Good for you.
Thanks. No, it's
Yeah.
very exciting.
And if someone wanted to reach out to you just to have a chat, would that be cool?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
drop your Instagram in the show notes for anybody that wants to have a chat. And yeah, I so appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been awesome to hear everything.
No, thanks for having me. It's been a good corridor. Nice to catch up.
Yeah, exactly.
If you've made it this far through the podcast, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to me. Please do share this around, comment, like, subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're feeling up to it and you want to share your own story, please do reach out. Whether you're a friend or a stranger, I'd love to hear from you. Remember, sharing is caring, and you never know who you'll help with your own story. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.